A tired person lies awake while the city keeps breathing, its low sounds moving through the dark. In Harlem after midnight, elevated trains could rattle along the tracks, footsteps could echo on apartment stairs, and work still waited for morning. Dreams had been pushed aside by rent, hunger, and worry, yet the mind kept walking when the body needed rest. Yet in that hard night, a softer sound could rise from far away. Langston Hughes, born in Joplin, Missouri, in 1901 and shaped by years of travel, learned to hear those sounds without dismissing them. He turned the tired life of the city into words that could rest beside the heart, like a familiar melody remembered after the room had gone quiet. Hughes did not treat night as empty darkness. He filled it with slow breaths, pale stars, distant voices, and the steady beat of words spoken with care. In poems such as Dream Variations, the movement from daylight toward night becomes a movement toward freedom, rest, and release, even when the world outside still imposes limits. His way was simple but deep. He noticed common pain, listened for its beat, and shaped that beat into poems that could move like a song. The quiet was never truly quiet. It held a hidden tune in a repeated phrase, a measured line, or the pause after a hard truth. Rhythm made private feeling easier to carry. Behind the name Langston Hughes was a real man who could feel apart from others. His parents separated when he was young, and he spent important years living with his grandmother, Mary Patterson Langston, in Lawrence, Kansas. He knew tired days, long roads, and the ache of wanting beauty when money, racism, and uncertainty left little room for it. A famous name can look like a statue from far away, especially after books, awards, and school lessons have fixed a writer in history. But Hughes still had to wake, work, travel, and face the weight of being seen. Before his literary success, he worked as a busboy and sailor, carrying hope while the world judged what he wrote and who he was. That brings us to the soft question at the heart of his work. How can words born from struggle become a place of rest? Hughes never answered by pretending suffering was small. Instead, he gave difficult experience a rhythm, a name, and a human voice, allowing readers to meet pain without being swallowed by it. Hughes found part of the answer in dreams, blues, jazz, city hush, and sounds that return again and again. He admired the music of black communities because its repeated patterns could hold both sorrow and endurance. His poems do not make grief vanish. They give grief a shape the mind can hold, revisit, and sometimes survive. The world around him had many hard walls. During Hughes's lifetime, black Americans faced segregation, racist violence, unequal schools, poor pay, restricted housing, and closed doors in publishing and employment. The Supreme Court's Plessy decision had upheld segregation before his birth, and its consequences still shaped daily life when Hughes began publishing in the 1920s. Still, life was never only pain. People made songs, shared stories, raised families, laughed with friends, attended church, worked in kitchens and factories, and held on to dreams. The night could carry hurt and hope in the same breath. Hughes understood that joy was not a denial of injustice. For many people, it was evidence that injustice had not conquered them. Hughes lived and wrote during the Harlem Renaissance, the powerful cultural movement that gathered force in the 1920s. Black writers, singers, artists, journalists, and thinkers challenged older stereotypes and insisted that black life deserved serious attention. Magazines such as The Crisis and Opportunity helped bring new voices to readers across the United States. For Hughes, this was more than a place in history. It was a chance to let everyday people enter poetry without dressing their lives in grand words. A tired worker, a singer, a child, or a dreamer could stand at the center. His 1926 collection, The Weary Blues, made ordinary speech and musical cadence central to modern American poetry. Harlem was not a bright picture made for show. It was a neighborhood shaped by the Great Migration, when millions of black Americans moved from the rural South to cities in the North and Midwest. Its streets held crowded apartments, steps worn by constant passage, Voices behind thin walls, music slipping from small rooms, and people carrying long days home. Hughes could hear a whole world in those sounds. Each voice held a story, and each story carried both a burden and a small spark that would not go out. A blues singer's repeated line could preserve memory. A child's dream could challenge a narrow future. A worker's plain complaint could become a record of history. That is why sound mattered more to him than fancy language. His words were clear enough to speak aloud and strong enough to stay in the mind. He drew from black speech, spirituals, blues and jazz, not as decoration, but as living forms that carried experience from one person to another. He used pace, pauses, repeated sounds, and lines that came back like a song. Like a lullaby, the pattern gives the heart something steady to follow, even when the meaning holds pain. In the weary blues, the musical structure does not erase exhaustion. It lets exhaustion move, settle, and become part of a larger human expression. Before he wrote, Hughes listened. He listened to music, to talk, to jokes that hid sadness, and to tired voices that still carried strength. He travelled widely, worked different jobs, and observed people outside literary drawing rooms. That attention helped him build poems from the sounds of actual life rather than from an artificial idea of elegance. He learned how people hold feeling in the body. A person may smile while carrying grief or speak softly while standing firm. Hughes heard those hidden truths, then let them breathe inside the poem. By joining plain language to a measured rhythm, he made room for sorrow, dignity, desire, and hope to rest together without one cancelling the others. The blues offered Hughes a simple kind of truth. It could name hurt plainly, then give that hurt a beat, a pattern, and a shape. In the black musical tradition that grew from the American South, sorrow could enter a 12-bar form and return with variation. The pain remained real, but it no longer had to stay still and silent. That mattered to Hughes because the blues gave a wounded person a way to speak without disguising the wound. It did not call suffering weakness, and it did not pretend that endurance made suffering disappear. Instead, it showed that a hurt person could still move, still speak, and still make sound, even when ordinary conversation had failed. The Weary Blues begins with a meeting between a listener and a musician in Harlem at night. The listener hears a man play music filled with deep tiredness, his piano carrying the strain of work, loneliness, and memory. The song seems to contain more than notes and rhythm. It carries the weight of an entire life pressing into one performance. The listener cannot take that weight away, and the poem never claims otherwise. But by hearing it, the listener is no longer alone with it. One person makes music from pain, while another stays near enough to recognize what the music contains. That attention becomes the first form of comfort because the musician's suffering is received instead of ignored. The poem moves like music rather than like a plain report. Hughes lets the reader follow the listener's close attention, then feel the musician's playing take over the moment. The language shifts between observation and sound, between what the listener notices and what the piano releases. The poem seems to lean toward the performance, as if its words are trying to hear. Beats return, then slow. Small breaks leave room for the tired feeling to rise, while repeated phrases create the sensation of a song circling the same wound. These changes make the poem feel almost physical, like a tune moving through a dark room after midnight. The rhythm does not rush toward a solution. It gives weariness time to become fully audible. The musician stands at the center of the night, but he is not shown as a symbol emptied of ordinary life. He is a person carrying a burden that may be difficult to explain in plain talk. His body, voice, and piano performance do what explanation cannot. His art speaks from the place where daily words may fail. The listener can stand near that pain but cannot mend it. That limitation is part of the poem's kindness. Hughes does not pretend that sympathy can repair poverty, racism, exhaustion, or grief in a single night. He shows something smaller and more believable. Care can keep a lonely person from being unseen, even when the larger conditions remain unchanged. Jazz poetry is poetry shaped by the feel of jazz. It can use a beat, a surprise, a return, a pause, and a sense of freedom within structure. Hughes understood that jazz did not simply provide a subject for poems. It offered a method, allowing language to bend, repeat, answer itself, and carry emotion through timing as much as through meaning. In Hughes's hands, a line may lean ahead, slow down, or turn back to an earlier sound. One phrase may seem to answer another, much as a singer answers a piano or a soloist answers the rhythm section. The poem can feel loose and free, yet it remains held by an underlying pulse. Freedom does not erase form, it makes form breathe. A sad rhythm can bring a strange kind of peace. A tired person may not need bright words, forced optimism, or quick instructions for becoming hopeful. They may need to hear that their feeling can be held without shame. The blues offers that permission through sound, turning emotional heaviness into something with duration, movement, and a beginning that can lead toward an ending. The blues gives sadness a safe shape. It lets a person feel the full weight of a hard day without being swallowed by it. The singer does not have to deny the ache before making music from it. Someone else has carried a feeling like this and has found a way to let it sound, repeat, and pass through the body. Hughes brings that gift from the spoken voice to the written page. Short phrases, repeated sounds, and carefully placed breaks make the reader hear the poem instead of only looking at it. The page begins to behave like a performance space. Reading becomes a small act of listening, with the reader following rhythm, breath, pressure, and release. The beat may come softly, but it keeps the page alive. The sounds return like steps on a quiet street, regular enough to guide someone through darkness. Each return helps the feeling stay close without allowing it to grow shapeless. Repetition becomes more than decoration. It gives the weary mind a pattern to hold when everything else feels uncertain. Then the poem makes its first deep turn. Its softness is not a cheerful lie, and its musical ease does not cancel the conditions behind the weariness. The night is still heavy, the musician is still tired, and the world around him is still marked by unfairness. The beauty of the performance exists beside hardship, not instead of it. Comfort does not mean that everything is fine. Here, comfort means that pain has found a human witness. Someone hears it, stays with it, and lets it exist without demanding that it become inspiring. The poem refuses the easy promise that suffering automatically produces wisdom. Sometimes being heard is the immediate good, while justice and repair remain unfinished. That kind of witness can reach a person in a sleepless room, whether in Hughes's Harlem or decades later in another city. It may reach someone who worked late, worried in silence, or hid sadness through the day. Hughes does not solve those troubles, and he does not turn the listener into a savior. He makes room for the feeling before asking anyone to rise above it. In that room, the poem does not force a smile or pretend that dawn has already arrived. It offers a place to rest for a little while, held by rhythm and attention. The heart can hear its own hurt without being judged for it, and it can learn that being weary is not the same as being empty, defeated, or without hope. In Hughes's night scenes, darkness is not always a threat. It can become a quiet cover, a few private hours when a person steps away from judgment, demands, and watchful eyes. After the noise of work and crowded streets has faded, the mind can hear its own thoughts again. Night does not erase hardship, but it lowers the pressure long enough for an inner voice to breathe. The city may still contain traffic, factory shifts, rent due, and rules applied unfairly. Yet night gives that same city a softer face. Its streets and rooms become less exposed, and a small dream can draw breath without being questioned. For someone denied space during the day, those dark hours offer a temporary widening of the world, a place where desire does not immediately meet rejection. The stars do not repair a broken life. They do not promise that pain will end by morning, or that a landlord, employer, police officer, or hostile crowd will suddenly become fair. They simply remain above suffering, small and steady. Their distance matters. A tired person can look towards something constant and feel, for one quiet moment, less isolated inside the burden they carry. That space matters because pain can become total when there is nowhere else to place it. A person may feel poor, lost, overworked, or forgotten, while the wide night holds both the wound and the stars. The hurt remains real. Hughes never needs to deny it, but it is no longer the entire sky. Darkness creates enough room for sorrow and possibility to exist together. In Dream Variations, Hughes turns toward a dream of release. Published in The Weary Blues in 1926, the poem imagines freedom through movement, joy, rest, and dignity rather than through an abstract political slogan. The dream is physical and immediate. It asks what it would feel like to move without restraint, to enjoy the world openly, and to end the day without carrying humiliation into sleep. It is called Variations because the dream does not appear in only one fixed form. It returns with changes in rhythm, image, and emotional emphasis, like a tune heard again through a different instrument. One return may feel like dancing, another may feel like rest. Each version reveals another part of the same wish, showing that freedom can include motion, pleasure, privacy, and peace. This dream lives in the body. It is not only an argument about laws, elections, schools, or public policy, although those structures shape the life Hughes knew. It is also the wish to stretch, move, dance, sleep, and take a full breath without feeling pressed down. Freedom becomes something muscles recognize, something the lungs and limbs can experience before institutions are willing to name it. That physical quality brings the poem close to the heart. It speaks for a person who wants joy to belong to them in an ordinary way, without fear, shame, surveillance, or the need to request permission. The desire is not extravagant. It is the right to feel light for a while, to inhabit one's own body, and to discover that happiness does not have to be defended before it can be felt. The repeated dream does not make hope weak. It makes hope believable. A mind often returns to what it needs most, especially when daily life keeps denying that need. Repetition gives the longing a pulse. Each return says that the desire has survived another day of pressure, and that even when circumstances remain unchanged, the inner life can continue naming what it refuses to surrender. Each change is like a hand smoothing a blanket over someone who has not yet fallen fully asleep. The feeling shifts, but the wish remains beneath it. Hughes shows hope as something practiced through return, memory, rhythm, and imagination, not as a miracle that appears once and never fades. A person may have to rehearse freedom inwardly before the outside world makes room for it. Dream Variations stands beside the hard facts of life. The dream does not mean unfair treatment has ended, or that a tired worker has found an easy road. Hughes wrote during a period when segregation, racial violence, restricted employment, and unequal housing shaped everyday choices. Against that reality, the poem's pleasure is not evidence that suffering was imaginary. It is evidence that suffering did not possess everything. The poem means that inner life can still reach for more air and light. To dream in a world that has often said no is an act of courage because the dream rejects the limits imposed by other people. It keeps a door open when work, poverty, prejudice, and exhaustion try to close every door. The imagined freedom may be brief, but its existence challenges the claim that oppression defines the whole person. This is where a dream poem meets a lullaby. Both make a small, safe place inside the mind, using rhythm and repeated feeling to lower the force of daily worry. Both help a person loosen their grip on unfinished tasks, unpaid bills, insults, and fear. A lullaby does not rebuild the world while it is being sung. It gives the listener enough calm to rest inside the world that still remains. But Hughes does not offer childish escape. His rest is honest because it does not require the world to become harmless first. The night may still contain danger, and morning may still bring work, discrimination, or disappointment. Yet a short period of peace can restore attention and strength. Rest becomes preparation, not surrender, allowing a person to gather enough of themselves to meet the next day. A dream can be carried through darkness even when no public victory has arrived. It may live in a tired mind during a long shift, on a late train, or in a small room after everyone else has gone quiet. Nothing outside may confirm the dream. Still, holding it preserves a private measure of value. The person remains more than the conditions that surround them. A person may close their eyes not because the world is safe, but because the mind needs one place that harm cannot reach for a while. That shelter is temporary, and Hughes understands its limits. Even so, a few protected moments can interrupt fear. In that brief inward refuge, endurance becomes gentler, and survival is no longer imagined only as clenched teeth and constant resistance. Hughes reaches people through ordinary words. He writes of dreams, night, music, work, and longing, without hiding the feeling behind academic language or elaborate explanation. His vocabulary stays close to daily life, which lets large questions enter through familiar experiences. A worker, a child, a traveller, or anyone awake with worry can recognize the emotional ground before needing to analyze the poem. That plain language lets the feeling arrive at once. A reader does not need special training to enter dream variations. The poem begins with experiences the body already understands. They need only a tired heart, a living memory, or one quiet wish that has not yet disappeared. In Hughes's Night, that small wish is not childish weakness. It is a soft, persistent form of life. Hughes brings workers, musicians, neighbours, lovers and dreamers into the soft light of his poems. In Harlem during the 1920s, that meant rent-weary tenants, late-shift labourers, club musicians, and people moving through streets still shaped by segregation. Their lives may seem small to those in power, but Hughes does not treat them as small. He gives ordinary experience the scale of history. He gives their tiredness a place to rest. He gives their jokes, wishes, arguments, and quiet hope the same care that great men often receive in official histories. A person waiting for a streetcar, singing after midnight, or remembering a lost love becomes worthy of exact attention. The lullaby works because it tells everyday people that their inner lives matter. Repetition is one of the ways Hughes carries feeling. A word, sound, or thought may return again and again, like a foot keeping time when the heart feels unsure. In blues music, that return can follow a 12-bar pattern, bringing the listener back to familiar ground while the emotion changes around it. Hughes uses recurrence to make feeling audible and memorable. Each return brings comfort, but it also keeps the hurt near. The listener does not have to solve the pain at once or pretend that a single insight can repair it. The steady beat makes it possible to stay with what happened. Repetition becomes a form of endurance, holding the mind together when circumstances offer no quick relief. Beauty can hurt when it carries a life that has not been given ease. The music in the weary blues moves us because it holds fatigue inside it, not because it rises above all pain. Published in 1926 in Hughes's first poetry collection, the poem does not polish the musician's suffering into a distant symbol. It lets weariness remain physical, social, and personal. Hughes lets beauty and sorrow share the same room. The sound may be gentle, yet the life behind it remains hard, shaped by racial exclusion, low wages, exhaustion, and the uncertain economics of performance. That truth keeps the poem warm, honest, and close to the ground. Its tenderness does not erase difficulty. It gives difficulty a form the ear can bear. Jazz often works like a talk between people. One voice begins, another answers, and a phrase may return in a new shape. In a blues performance, the singer can stretch a syllable, delay a resolution, or leave space after a line, allowing response and silence to become part of the meaning. Even a pause can carry knowledge that explanation would weaken. Hughes writes in much the same way. His poems can feel like a talk between pain and hope, between the night and the dawn, between the tired heart and the part that still keeps going. The lines do not always close the argument. Instead, they leave room for an answer from memory, music, another person, or the reader's own experience. There was courage in letting black speech, blues feeling, and jazz rhythm shape serious art. During the Harlem Renaissance, writers such as Hughes challenged literary standards that favoured European forms and middle-class respectability. He honoured voices that polite culture might call too common, too loud, or too plain, then showed that their cadences could carry history, irony, intelligence, and beauty. He did not ask his people to hide their sound in order to be heard. He let their words stand with their wit, ache, humour, and strength, while respecting the difference between authentic speech and a caricature made for an outside audience. That choice gave dignity to lives often pushed aside. It also widened American poetry beyond the institutions that had defined it. His tenderness also came from contrast. He placed the hard day beside the soft night, public judgment beside a private dream, and the loud city beside a quiet inner voice. Harlem could be crowded, commercial, and electrically awake, Yet a single room after midnight could hold a loneliness no parade or theatre audience could disguise. Contrast makes the inner life visible. Sorrow rests beside music, and that closeness changes both. A blues phrase can make grief feel shaped rather than scattered, while grief gives the phrase its pressure and depth. The night feels tender, not because the world is kind, but because a human heart still finds a small place for rest within it. In Hughes, softness is not surrender, it is survival with its guard lowered. Being heard can carry its own cost. Hughes became a key voice of the Harlem Renaissance, received major attention from literary circles, and spent decades writing across poetry, fiction, journalism, theatre, and political commentary. Yet recognition could not remove the loneliness of seeing pain clearly. Public importance did not guarantee private ease, and artistic influence could not protect him from conflict or isolation. To speak for many people is to carry more than one life in the mind. Hughes could honour the worker, the musician, the migrant, the student, and the dreamer, but he could not live each life for them or make every burden end. His work kept that limit in view. Representation mattered, but it never became a claim that one poet could replace the people whose lives he described. A small moment could become a larger truth in Hughes's hands. A musician's tired playing could open into a study of loneliness, connecting one performance in a Harlem night spot to the broader pressures of race, labour, and emotional isolation. The scene remains particular, yet its meaning expands. A few repeated notes can reveal how a whole society distributes exhaustion and who is expected to endure it silently. A night sky could become a room where hope has space to breathe. A repeated dream could become a claim to dignity, saying that a person deserves more than the life forced upon them. Hughes's famous attention to deferred dreams turns private longing into public evidence. The dream is not childish decoration. It measures what injustice has postponed, compressed, or denied. Still, the listener in the weary blues cannot rescue the singer. Hearing the pain does not take it away, and love alone cannot mend every wound. The observer can recognize the performance, remember its sound, and feel changed by it, but the musician must return to the conditions that produced the weariness. Compassion has power, yet it cannot substitute for justice, rest, wages, safety, or freedom. That helplessness is known to anyone who has watched a loved one struggle. Hughes offers a hard kind of kindness, to pay close attention, to stay near the sorrow, and to let the singer's truth remain heard. The lullaby does not promise that mourning will solve everything. It offers something more honest, a steady human presence that refuses to turn away when the final note fades. A poem can become a small place to rest, especially when the day has demanded more than a person could give. Its lines do not hurry the tired mind toward a lesson, a victory, or a bright ending. They leave room to breathe, to remember what happened, and to feel the weight of it without immediately turning that feeling into an explanation. In Langston Hughes's night poems, silence matters as much as sound. The reader may pause beside the darkness, hear the ache beneath the quiet, and remain there for a while. That pause is not empty. It creates a narrow shelter where grief, fatigue, and loneliness can be held without being denied, corrected, or pushed away before they are understood. But the soft sound is not surrender. Beneath the calm, Hughes refuses to accept a cruel world as though cruelty were ordinary or permanent. His gentleness has direction. It protects the exhausted person long enough to recognize what has wounded them, and then preserves enough strength to imagine that the wound does not have the final word. In Dream Variations, first published in 1926, the wish for freedom reaches toward open air, light, movement, and joy. In The Weary Blues, published in 1925, the tired musician is heard and honored, even while his song carries sorrow. Both poems push back against forces that make a person small, unseen, disposable, or easy for history to forget. That is why rest carries strength. A tired person may need sleep before facing another hard day, another unfair rule, another closed door, or another long fight against contempt. Rest does not erase the conflict waiting outside. It gives the body and mind a chance to recover enough energy to recognize the conflict clearly and continue without being completely consumed by it. Hughes gives that person room to stop proving their worth. Dreaming is not laziness and rest is not weakness. A worker, a student, a parent, or a musician does not become less valuable by needing recovery. For one quiet moment, the heart may lay down its heavy load, loosen its grip on fear, and still keep its hope alive. The music of a poem can enter the body through its pace. A reader slows down, breathes with the line, and notices when a word, vowel, or rhythm returns. Hughes understood that poetry could carry the pulse of speech, the movement of jazz, and the measured persistence of the blues, allowing meaning to arrive not only through ideas, but through the physical experience of sound. Then the words begin to settle. The poem does not need to shout in order to remain powerful. Its beat can move gently through the mind, like a hand keeping time in the dark, steady enough to prevent panic and quiet enough to let difficult thoughts rise. Repetition becomes a form of reassurance, not because the pain has vanished, but because the listener is no longer facing it alone. The night in Hughes's work is not empty of sound. The blues remain, with their repeated lines and unfinished ache. Jazz remains, with its breaks, returns, and sudden changes in pressure. Voices, footsteps, streets, apartments, clubs, and city noise remain close. Even at midnight, Harlem is not silent. It is a living field of human presence. Peace does not come from removing all pain. It comes when pain can be heard without taking over the whole self. The sorrow is still there and the history behind it is still real, but it no longer stands alone. Music gives it company, rhythm gives it shape, and language creates enough distance for a person to hear suffering without becoming nothing but suffering. Harlem first appears as a wide, busy place, filled with people, storefronts, apartments, late lights, and overlapping voices. Then Hughes draws closer, from the crowd to a room, from the room to one tired body, and from that body to a breath held between two lines. The scale changes quietly, but the effect is powerful. Public history enters private experience. A broad city story becomes one person's breath, one person's dream, or one musician's quiet song after the audience has gone. This close view makes the larger struggle feel near rather than abstract. The city becomes a collection of private lives, each carrying its own night, its own memory, and its own method of surviving until morning. Hughes's dream-centered poems speak to the part of a person that hardship tries to silence. That part may be young, inexperienced, or frightened, but it is not weak. A dream can preserve curiosity when daily life has become narrow. It can keep a person connected to a future that cannot yet be measured, purchased, or guaranteed. Learning to protect a dream can take a whole life. No one can know for sure when the dream will come true, or whether it will arrive in the form first imagined. Yet the dream still asks to be kept safe from ridicule, exhaustion, and repeated disappointment. Hope begins there, in the choice not to throw away the inner possibility simply because the present refuses to make room for it. Across dream variations, the dream points toward freedom, sunlight, movement, and joy. In Hughes's night poems, it makes a quiet room inside the mind, a place where the self can remain intact. In his blue-shaped writing, it keeps longing alive beneath deep weariness. The dream may bend under pressure, but it continues to mark the direction in which a fuller life could exist. This refuge is made from words, sound, memory, and the small space where a person can still imagine more. It does not carry the dreamer away from work, history, or responsibility. Instead, it helps the dreamer meet those realities without losing every gentle thing inside. A poem becomes useful not by denying life, but by returning a little inner room to someone living through it. Yet dreaming can hurt. A person who hopes can also feel the pain of being blocked, delayed, overlooked, or ignored. The clearer the imagined freedom becomes, the sharper its absence may feel. That tension gives Hughes's tenderness, its honesty. The lullaby comforts the listener, but it also reveals how much comfort has been needed and how long the need may have lasted. Hughes's hope matters because it knows this danger. It does not pretend that every wish will be granted, every injustice corrected, or every night followed by an easy morning. It is the fragile act of returning to a dream after the world has tried to take it away. Each return becomes a quiet refusal, proving that weariness can speak softly without surrendering the future. Hughes does not tie every feeling into a bright ending. In poems such as Mother to Son, the staircase remains rough, splintered, and unfinished. In the weary blues, the music offers release without pretending that poverty, exhaustion, or loneliness has disappeared. His poems do not need to promise victory before they can bring comfort. They leave room for a hard road, a mixed heart, and a tomorrow no one can yet see. The speaker may still be waiting, grieving, or carrying an old wound when the poem closes. That is why the lullaby feels true. It does not ask a tired listener to smile before the pain is gone. In Hughes's world, the dream often rises from a worn body. Someone may have worked all day in a kitchen, factory, field, or office, waited through long years of segregation, carried fear through a crowded city, or watched good chances slip away. The dream begins under pressure, not in comfort, and its first sound may be no louder than a breath. Still, that person may look toward light, music, and open space. In dream variations, the wish to dance, rest, and whirl beneath a night sky feels powerful because it belongs to someone denied freedom in ordinary daylight. The dream feels strong because it comes from someone who has every reason to give up, yet still turns toward hope. A lullaby works in steps. First, the poem names the feeling, whether it is fatigue, longing, sorrow, or desire. Then its beat gives that feeling a slow place to rest, much as a repeated melody steadies a child or a tired adult. The rhythm does not erase the burden. It makes the burden possible to carry for another moment. After that, night images gather around the feeling, like a dark room around a small lamp. Hughes may bring in stars, moonlight, sleep, shadow, music, or the quiet after midnight. At the end, the poem leaves a little space for hope. Each step works because the poem does not lie about the hurt or rush past the person living through it. Many tired people do not need advice first. They need someone to notice what the day has done to them. A factory shift can leave the hands aching. A long search for work can drain the voice. An insult repeated for years can make silence feel safer than speech. Recognition comes before repair, and Hughes understands that order. Hughes makes that notice into song. He sees the weight behind work, the fear behind good manners, and the wish hidden behind a quiet face. In his poems, those feelings are not small or shameful. They belong to history, family, labor, race, desire, and survival, and they deserve the same serious attention given to any grand public event. A single voice can begin a much wider human story. The musician in the weary blues stays a musician, and the dreamer in dream variations stays a dreamer. Hughes does not turn either figure into a vague symbol stripped of identity, yet the reader may feel a tiredness of their own, and that recognition creates intimacy without erasing difference. This widening does not erase the person in the poem. It builds a bridge from one life to another. A late-night performer in Harlem can remain rooted in a particular room, neighborhood, and historical moment while still reaching someone reading decades later. Personal detail becomes shared feeling, and shared feeling becomes a form of companionship across time. In the quiet hours, a person may feel relief, sadness, want, fear, and hope all at once. The end of a workday may bring silence, but silence does not produce only one emotion. Hughes does not force one feeling to defeat the rest. His poems allow contradictions to remain together, because real exhaustion rarely arrives with a single clean name. His night can hold joy beside grief. It can hold a soft wish beside a hard truth, a remembered song beside an uncertain morning, and a desire for freedom beside the knowledge of what freedom has cost. That is why the poems feel close and real. They respect the mess inside a human heart instead of arranging it into a simple lesson. Jazz gives Hughes room to bend and return. A line may slow down, move on, and come back to the same feeling with new strength. This resembles the structure of a blues performance, where a phrase can be repeated after experience has changed its meaning. Repetition is not emptiness. It is memory testing the wound and discovering another way to speak. There may be a pause, then a rise, then a gentle change in speed. A musician can stretch one syllable, settle into a beat, and then let the next phrase arrive with greater force. This is not just a music trick. It lets the heart move as real hearts do, without standing still or pretending to be fixed. Hughes's plain voice carries its own quiet strength. It does not ask permission to speak of black longing, black music, black dreams, or the deep need for rest. During the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, that directness challenged literary habits that treated black life as background or spectacle. His language made ordinary speech carry historical weight. That calm voice can comfort anyone who has been told to hide their words, their roots, or their hope. It speaks especially to people pressured to sound acceptable, remain grateful, or make their pain easier for others to hear. Hughes answers that pressure without shouting. A tired heart may still speak plainly and still be worthy of care. The spaces between the words matter too. A pause can give the listener time to feel what the poem has touched, whether the feeling arrives as recognition, grief, tenderness, or a memory that had been kept quiet. In spoken poetry and blues, silence is not an empty gap. It can be part of the rhythm, carrying meaning without explanation. In a night poem, what is left unsaid may carry loneliness, peace, or both. Hughes does not fill every space for us with an answer, a moral, or a final explanation. He leaves the door open so each listener can enter with a private memory, a difficult night, or an unfinished dream, and find a little room to breathe. After the books were closed and the room grew still, Langston Hughes remained a man beneath the public name. Born in 1901 and celebrated by readers across the Harlem Renaissance, he still knew the private weight of unfinished work, financial uncertainty, loneliness, and exhaustion. Applause could honour a poem, but it could not supply every hour of rest, love, or peace. Many people recognise their own hearts in his poems because Hughes wrote toward ordinary experience. Rented rooms, late trains, crowded streets, church songs, work, hunger, and postponed dreams. Yet the poet who helped strangers feel visible could still reach a night when his own hope seemed distant, like a small lamp behind a closed door that he did not yet know how to open. Hughes did not seal his poems inside one official meaning. He offered a rhythm, a dream, a city street, a river, or a field beneath stars, then allowed different readers to enter from different directions. A student, a worker, a musician, or a tired parent could hear the same lines and discover a private question waiting inside them. One person might enter through the blues, recognizing the bend of a repeated phrase and the patience required to say sorrow twice. Another might enter through the wish to rise, hearing the demand for dignity beneath a simple sentence. The path could change, but the poem's center remained steady. Pain can be spoken, and a dream can continue living. That openness carried a cost. To transform pain into art, Hughes had to bring hidden tiredness into language where strangers could hear it, judge it, or use it to understand themselves. His poems travelled through classrooms, newspapers, recordings, and public readings, but the intimate feeling inside them began in the difficult act of returning to what hurt. Each return to a hard feeling could disturb an old wound, yet it could also honour people whose lives were routinely passed over. Domestic workers, porters, labourers, musicians, children and families denied equal opportunity. Their songs and fears were not decorative details. By placing them inside literature, Hughes insisted that overlooked lives belonged at the centre of American memory. The soft lullaby is not weak because it is quiet. It is strong because it can face pain without becoming cruel, even when the surrounding world offers plenty of reasons for bitterness. A gentle rhythm can hold anger in a form that remains listenable, memorable, and human, allowing truth to travel farther than a shout might carry it. That lullaby can keep a dream alive without possessing proof that the dream will arrive. It can offer rest without asking anyone to surrender the right to fair treatment, safety, education, work, or respect. The comfort is not an instruction to accept injustice. It is a brief recovery of breath before the dreamer turns again toward what must change. In this way, Hughes made softness a kind of strength. The gentle sound does not turn away from the hard world of segregation, poverty, and exclusion. It helps the heart remain human while living inside that world. His poems do not pretend that rhythm repairs broken institutions, but they show how rhythm can keep a person from being reduced to despair. During a hard season, his poems offer 3 small acts. Name what hurts, instead of disguising it. Find a beat that steadies the breath, whether it comes from a song, a repeated line, or the cadence of walking. Then guard one dream from the dark, even if that dream is only the next morning, the next page, or one more attempt. These are not rules that repair a life in a single night. They are quiet steps for days when hope feels tired and practical problems remain unsolved. A poem cannot erase a bill, change a law, restore a lost relationship, or cure illness. It can still give language to the person facing those burdens without facing them wordlessly. Hughes's dream is not a command to leave the world forever. It is a small inner room where a person may rest long enough to meet the world again, carrying a clearer sense of what matters. The room may be made from memory, music, imagination, or a few lines repeated until their rhythm becomes familiar. That shelter matters because the dreamer still cares. Someone who has completely surrendered no longer protects a future, but Hughes's dream remains connected to work, community, justice, and return. Rest is not the same as surrender when it gives the heart enough strength to rise, answer the day, and take part in the unfinished struggle. At first, the night may feel empty, with no answer beyond the silence. Then a far rhythm appears, perhaps in a memory of piano keys or a phrase carried through the street. A human voice follows, and the darkness changes. Nothing has been magically repaired, but the night is now shared instead of belonging to one person alone. Hughes joins the deep feeling of the blues with the calm space of night. The sound does not erase darkness or decorate it with false comfort. Instead, it places another life inside the darkness, giving loneliness a pulse and sorrow a shape that can be heard, remembered, and carried beyond the moment in which it began. In The Weary Blues, published in Hughes's first poetry collection in 1926 after the poem had appeared in 1925, a stranger's music enters the private world of the person listening. The observer does not know the musician's complete history, his debts, disappointments, or hopes. Still, the song creates a brief bond between two people who might otherwise remain unknown to each other. That bond has limits, and Hughes does not hide them. One song cannot save a life, and one listener cannot carry every pain belonging to a performer, a neighborhood, or a nation. Still, for a little while, two separate lives meet through sound. The meeting does not solve suffering, but it prevents suffering from remaining entirely unseen. Hope in Hughes's blues does not need a bright face, a guaranteed victory, or a promise that tomorrow will be easy. It can live in the choice to keep making sound, to return to the same dream after disappointment, and to let a tired voice continue. In that persistence, the night becomes a lullaby, not an escape from life, but a way to endure it without losing the future. In the quiet of night, a dream can feel small and brave, like a soft light held close against the dark. It may be no larger than a wish for a safe room, a fair wage, a warm meal, or one morning without humiliation. Yet even a fragile dream can become a private shelter, protecting the future from the pressure of the present. The world may call such a dream childish. It may tell a tired person to be practical, to ask for less, and to expect less. Langston Hughes knew that kind of pressure in the early 20th century, when segregation and poverty narrowed the choices available to many Black Americans. For people denied full freedom and respect, dreaming was not foolish. It protected the part of the heart that still knew it was worthy. To keep a dream alive, a person must guard it from many voices. Those voices may come from poverty, unfair laws, racial violence, fear, or the daily need to survive. Hughes treated the dream as a real human need, not as a sweet lie meant to distract from hunger. In that choice, there is quiet courage. A person pushed down by circumstance still dares to picture a life with room to breathe. His poems often begin with weight. The body is tired after labor. The road is hard, the rent is due, and the night holds old hurt that daylight has failed to settle. Hughes does not hide these facts behind polished language or borrowed dignity. He lets the rhythm move slowly enough to feel the burden, allowing each plain phrase to carry the pressure of an actual life. Then the poem begins to open. A beat enters, sometimes shaped by the blues, sometimes by the looseness of jazz. A dream rises. The words make space around the pain instead of forcing the pain to vanish. The ending does not tie every wound shut or pretend that tomorrow will be easy. It leaves a little air, and that air lets the heart rest. This is the tender power of paying attention. Hughes listened to people who were often treated like part of the background, especially workers, musicians, travellers, and families whose stories rarely entered respectable literary rooms. He noticed the labourer, the singer, the dreamer, and the person walking home alone after midnight, carrying private thoughts through a public world. When he gave those lives a place in his poems, he did more than record them. He showed that their feelings mattered and that their speech could carry music without being translated into someone else's language. A person often ignored could become the heart of the song, held in view with patience, dignity, and care. The Harlem Renaissance grew from this same need for belonging. During the 1920s, black writers, singers, painters, editors, and intellectuals built new paths for their work in Harlem and far beyond it. Magazines such as The Crisis and Opportunity helped circulate new voices, while clubs, theatres, churches, and newspapers created audiences. They were not only making art, they were making a world where black thought, joy, pain, and beauty could stand in the open. Hughes's soft, night-bound poems lived inside that larger work. Their calm was not empty, and it was never simple escape. It carried the strength of a people shaping a place for themselves, while segregation, low wages, and racial violence still pressed hard against their lives. The quiet surface allowed deeper endurance to be heard without being turned into a speech or a slogan. In Hughes's Night, a person does not need to keep changing to make others feel safe. Identity can lie still. Longing can speak without permission. Memory can stay near without presenting evidence or giving a full defense. The darkness does not demand a performance, and the listener is not required to become smaller, brighter, or more acceptable before receiving comfort. That relief matters. For a little while, no one has to prove the right to hurt, hope, rest, or dream. The night becomes a room where the self may sit down and be whole, even if the day has called that wholeness impossible. Rest is not surrender here. It is a brief recovery of strength, a pause before the world begins asking again. Simple words can hold deep pain. A plain word like night, dream, tired, or blue can open a large space inside the mind when the rhythm gives it care. Hughes understood that familiar language could reach readers quickly because it did not stand between them and the feeling. The small word became a doorway into work, loneliness, history, desire, and hope. Hughes trusted clear speech. He did not cover sorrow with difficult vocabulary or make suffering sound elegant from a safe distance. He placed small, known words in a strong pattern, and their meaning grew through repetition, pause, and sound. The poem stays open, ready to meet the hidden history each reader carries, whether that history includes migration, exclusion, grief, labour, or love. Behind every musical line is a human effort. Someone had to live through the feeling before it could become art. Someone had to shape exhaustion into a phrase, loneliness into a rhythm, and memory into a voice that could travel. Later, someone in a quiet room may receive that sound and recognize an emotion that had seemed private, shapeless, and impossible to explain. The poem becomes a chain of care. One life gives its pain a form. Another life hears it across years, cities, and changes in language. The distance between them does not vanish, but it grows softer. A shared feeling has crossed the dark, moving from the musician's experience to Hughes's page, and from the page into the inner life of a stranger. This is the full path from blues to lullaby. Hughes notices real hardship, hears the blues inside it, and lets jazz guide the changing beat. He places the voice in the night, brings in a dream, and leaves behind a small, gentle hope. The lullaby does not deny the ache that produced it. It gives that ache a shape quiet enough to be carried. Each step stays tied to a human need. The music does not float above suffering or decorate it from a distance. It rises from a tired body, a long day, a crowded room, and the wish to be seen without shame. Its softness comes from accuracy. Because the poem remembers what hurt, its comfort feels earned rather than manufactured. The deepest truth of the weary blues is not that the tired musician is saved. The song does not erase his life, and the poem cannot lift every weight from his shoulders. What it can do is preserve the sound of his feeling, giving exhaustion a witness and sorrow a place to rest. In that small act, the night becomes gentle without pretending the darkness is gone. The deepest truth of dream variations is that freedom does not live only in thought or in a political promise. It moves through the body, through the wish to dance, rest, breathe, and feel the night without fear. The poem's movement turns freedom into something physical, something measured in motion, sunlight, shade, and the body's right to exist unthreatened. The dream stays alive because it is felt again and again. It is not far away in some unreachable future. It is practiced in the mind, held in the heart, and protected through dark hours when exhaustion makes hope difficult to name. Repetition becomes a form of endurance, keeping the imagined morning present even before morning arrives. That is why a weary person can still make something true. The musician, the dreamer, and Hughes all understand what it means to carry tiredness while reaching for meaning. A person may have little energy left after work, travel, poverty, or rejection, yet still shape a rhythm, a sentence, or a private hope that outlasts the hour that produced it. Art does not take the tiredness away. It cannot shorten a workday, pay a debt, repair an unjust institution, or guarantee sleep. But it can keep tiredness from becoming the whole story. A song, a poem, or one soft thought can leave room for life to grow beside hardship, so weariness becomes part of the record rather than the final verdict. The lullaby also carries a quiet challenge. It pushes back against every force that says some lives do not matter, some voices are too ordinary for literature, or some suffering should remain invisible. Its gentleness is not surrender. By giving careful attention to an exhausted person's inner world, it contests the habit of treating that person as background. Hughes gives worth to black dreams, black music, black speech, and the deep feelings found in the night. His calm voice does not ask for pity. It refuses to be pushed aside. Across poems shaped by blues, rhythms, and everyday language, he treats ordinary black experience as worthy of memory, craft, publication, and serious attention. Still, no poem can cure every lonely hour. A beautiful poem cannot know every part of the musician's life, and it cannot remove every hard night from Hughes's own life. Publication brings readers, but it does not erase private grief. Recognition may open a door while leaving the person who entered still carrying the same unanswered questions. That limit brings a quiet sadness. Yet even a small moment of being seen can matter. A person may remain alone, but the feeling is no longer locked inside one heart. Once a poem gives sorrow a recognizable rhythm, another reader can encounter it decades later and understand that isolation was real, shared, and capable of being named. What happened inside Hughes after he turned a painful sound into a finished poem? Did the shape of the words bring rest, open the wound once more, or do both at the same time? The act of revision may have organized the feeling without resolving it, turning an unsteady experience into lines that could be carried, read aloud, and remembered. The answer stays hidden. That silence honors the private depth behind the work. We can hear what he made, study its rhythm, and trace its language, but we cannot claim to know all that it cost him. Biographical records preserve dates, books, journeys, and public appearances. They rarely preserve the exact emotional pressure present when a line first became necessary. The poems gained a life beyond the rooms where they began. In 1926, Alfred A. Knopf published The Weary Blues, helping Hughes's words reach readers far beyond Harlem. A volume that began with local voices and musical forms could enter libraries, bookstores, private homes, classrooms, and conversations among readers who had never stood inside the places it remembered. That book gave public space to sounds and dreams that many people had tried to ignore. A quiet poem could now travel from one home to another, carrying a life that had once been left unheard. Print changed the scale of the encounter. A voice rooted in Harlem could reach readers across the United States and eventually beyond its borders. The human result was simple but real. A tired reader could find a place for their own sorrow, and a young writer could see that plain speech, music, and black life belonged in books. The example mattered because it joined artistic permission to a published fact. Someone had written this way, and an established press had allowed the work to stand in public. For families and communities, such poems offered more than comfort. They gave people words for feelings that often had no safe place to rest. A line could be remembered at a kitchen table, copied into a notebook, read in a classroom, or spoken quietly after a difficult day. Language became a shared container for fatigue, longing, dignity, and hope. Hughes's work also changed what many readers expected from American poetry. The record of his poems, his books, and his years in Harlem showed that the blues could shape serious art without losing its heart. Repetition, syncopation, vernacular speech, and emotional directness were not defects to be corrected. They were formal resources capable of carrying history and feeling. In 1926, the Weary Blues joined the wider story of the Harlem Renaissance, where writers and artists built new space for black voices. The old belief that fine poetry had to sound distant or grand could no longer stand as it once had. Hughes helped demonstrate that literary seriousness could arrive through a blues cadence, a familiar phrase, and the emotional pressure of ordinary life. But one question remains. How much of Hughes's own pain can any record truly show? A bibliography can list the Weary Blues, later collections, essays, plays, and decades of public work, yet none of those entries can measure the private cost of transforming memory into art. The archive gives us evidence, but never complete access to the person behind it. We have the poems, the books, and the public work. We do not have every silent hour that came before each line, or every feeling that stayed after the page was done. What remains is neither a complete confession nor an empty artifact. It is a crafted trace, enough to let us hear the tenderness, resistance, and fatigue, while leaving the deepest part of the night his own. One lasting result of Hughes's work is easy to trace. His poems entered schoolbooks, libraries, and public readings where children could meet the night in plain words. A quiet poem became part of the shared record of American life. That record touched people in small, real ways. A tired parent could read a few lines at home, and a child could hear that dreams still had a place, even after a hard day. For black children, this mattered deeply. The poems did not ask them to hide their pain or make their hopes small. They made room for both, and that room could bring a little rest. Hughes also changed what many readers thought a poem could be. It did not need hard words or a grand voice. It could sound like a person speaking softly after dark, with the beat of jazz and the ache of the blues beneath it. That change reached beyond books. Later poets, singers, and writers found that plain speech could carry deep feeling. A gentle line could hold history, sorrow, pride, and hope at the same time. Yet one question stays open. The record cannot tell us what Hughes felt on every night when he wrote of sleep, dreams, and peace. It cannot show which part came from his own weariness, which part came from care for others, and which part came from the patient work of craft. We can hear the care in the poems, but we cannot measure it. The silence around their making is part of their truth. Some inner rooms remain closed, even when the words leave the door ajar. The poems endured because they kept finding new homes. They lived in anthologies, classrooms, libraries, recordings, and the minds of people who needed a soft place to set down their fear. Their power was not locked in one age. Each new reader could take the same simple words and place them beside a new worry, a new dream, or a new morning. That is how a poem keeps moving without losing its heart. The human gift is quiet but real. A reader may feel less alone for a few moments, not because the hard world has changed, but because someone has named the need for rest. A family may pass that feeling from one voice to another. A teacher may show a child that beauty can grow from a life shaped by unfair pain. A listener may learn that hope does not have to shout to stay alive. Hughes left a wider mark by joining tenderness with truth. He showed that a lullaby could face the dark instead of turning away from it. In his hands, sleep was not surrender. It was a small space where a hurt mind could keep its dreams. That changed the shape of the night in American poetry. Darkness could hold danger, but it could also hold care. And within that soft, shared darkness, Langston Hughes gave tired hearts a place to breathe. In Langston Hughes's poetry, night does not arrive as an ending. It becomes a place where the dream can breathe. In Dream Variations, written during the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, Hughes pairs darkness with rest, warmth, and freedom, turning the close of day into something intimate rather than threatening. His language moves with the rhythm of a lullaby, arms opening, bodies settling, and the world growing quiet enough for a tired mind to recover. That softness carries a deeper history. For Black Americans facing segregation, violence, and economic exclusion, sleep was never separate from the longing for safety and dignity. Hughes lets the night hold that longing without forcing it to disappear. Beneath the tall tree, with evening coming gently, the dream can finally rest, protected for a moment from the noise of the waking world.